All right, good morning. It's Wednesday, brand new day, brand new opportunities. And so hope you're ready to rock and roll with that. And let's just get on down the road. We had a great night last night, in spite of whatever's going on everywhere else. Man, the Tamster and I made our way outside to our little patio out front and built a fire, sat cozied up on the love seat, and just talked about life and dreamt a little bit about what God's doing in this next season of our life, and just had a great evening doing that. And that's as it should be, right? Man, there's times to go get after it, and there's times to huddle in, just retreat for a minute. And that's what we did last night, and just hung out by that fire, and really enjoyed the evening. And so, hope you did as well. And man, I'm looking forward to this day and all that's in it. I got my life is filled with things I want to do today. Studies I want to conquer, work I want to accomplish at the Stone Company, and so many other things. And so we'll see what develops. All right. Hey, listen, we're in the book of Acts, chapter 16, and going to deal with, a demoniac today. And so it's kind of an interesting conversation that Luke records that took place. And so we're just kind of walk our way through that. So let me just bring you up to speed. We are with Paul and Silas, who's picked up Timothy on this second missionary journey. A young man, Greek, Jewish mother, Greek father. Obviously, Paul had led his mom and grandmother to the Lord, and they've discipled Timothy. So that by the time he comes around this second journey, Timothy's solidly entrenched in truth. Paul makes him a protege, brings him with him. They get blocked out of a couple of areas. And listen, that happens all the time, right? Lord shuts doors. And I'm grateful for doors that shut. They're not always pleasant. But when they shut, you go, hey, you know what? It's time to move on. And so Paul couldn't get in the directions that he felt like he needed to go to find new territory. But there was one sliver of a trail that went to Troas. And so he gets to Troas. He picks up Dr. Luke there. And then they sail across and they land here where they are today in Philippi. It's Europe, beachhead into Europe. And so they've been there a few days. They know that there are no synagogues in that area. There's some not too far away, but not in that area. And so Thyatira would be the closest. But anyway, there are some devout Jews there. That is those who have decided that the Greek gods, the Roman gods, aren't the way, and have embraced the concept of the Most High God. And so they're not Christians, but they are God seekers in that sense. And so in that place, they knew that they would find some people with no synagogue. They would be gathering by the river. We looked at that yesterday in Psalm 137, where it says that's kind of what happens when there's no other place to go. That's where they went. That's where Paul, assuming that he would find a place of prayer there, that there would be somebody by the river praying that he could have a conversation with. And so he did. He met Lydia. He explains the way of Christ to her. She receives it. She's baptized. She begs him to come stay at her house. She's a prominent woman, businesswoman in the area. And now she takes on the role of hostess and hospitality, of bringing in the church so that it can blossom. So she's now a Christ follower, and they've got a good beachhead going there, her and her whole household. So they're just daily talking about Christ there and in the places that they go. And so after that situation, we find here, let's just read the text. We're not going to, man, the fun part is what happens after this meeting. But right now, we're just going to look at this meeting. And it says this is they were going to the place of prayer, right? So the meeting in the house, they would still go to the place of prayer on the Sabbath. That would be kind of what they did, because there would be new people there, right? Not everybody. I mean, maybe they had part-time gatherings like we do here in America, where you kind of feel like people come to church every other week or whatever, 2 times a week, whatever. And so here, 2 times a month rather. And so here it is in verse 16. It says, "And as we were going to the place of prayer, we were met by a slave girl who had a spirit of divination and brought her owners much gain by fortune telling. She followed Paul and us, crying out, "These men are servants of the Most High God who proclaim to you the way of salvation." And this she kept doing for many days. So let's just kind of break this down and see what's going on. Kind of an interesting deal, makes my mind go in 1,000 different places. There's a young girl, and she has a spirit of divination. Interesting term is, as you begin to look through the Greek, it's the word python, which is like the snake, right? It's a spirit of divination. Now, if you start studying the Greek mythology, then you would understand that Apollo and these pythons began to that's was the spirit that they called it, began to speak the oracles of God, so to speak. And so this spirit of divination means that they're simply mouthpieces for the gods. In this case, obviously, the Satan himself, right? They're just a mouthpiece for Satan. They're fortune tellers. And you can see that it's everywhere. It's beginning to be more and more prominent. I mean, I've run into some of this downtown Birmingham. If you go to Jackson Square in New Orleans, it's surrounded by these people who are pretending to speak for God, and you'll see it everywhere. And so these are mouthpieces for Satan. That's the best way to describe it. They're really just little ventriloquists. Satan just animates them and lets them spit out whatever falsities they want to, and so they fill out lies and promises and all of these things. We know lies because the Scripture speaks of the fact that he is a liar, and that he's the father of lies, and that those who lie are the father of Satan as well. That's why lying is such a terrible sin. Because it likens it to that. But we've seen a host of people like this, very prominent people, right? Charles Manson would have been one of those. He pretended to speak for God, and yet he was just full of demons. Hitler, same way. I mean, on and on it goes. And they're making money. This is what's going on here. She's making money for the master. So she's not just an earthly slave. It says that she's a slave girl. But she's not just an earthly slave. She's a spiritually enslaved girl too. She's a demoniac. She's filled up with evil and is spitting this stuff out. Now, we'll talk about more of that in a minute when we get there. But listen, any time, and this is an interesting deal that I think we've seen take place, right? In the early church, you had Ananias and Sapphira, right? What were they doing? They had a deceptive spirit. They had a jealous spirit. They had an envious spirit. James tells us that those are the qualities of wisdom that is demonic. And so Ananias and Sapphira, Satan thought, well, hey, let's just trip the church up from within. And so he tried that method. And then as it began to move, right, he brought in Simon, the the magician, right? And so we saw, well, hey, he's going to try and do it in that way. Everywhere that the gospel is going to go, you should expect satanic resistance. It doesn't always look like this, but you should always expect it. Expect that to happen. Almost at every church that we've been to, we've experienced that, where there would be something, that would come up and it would test the spirits and different things like that. Man, when we first started the first church Tammy and I were in, man, it seemed like everybody wanted to have a word of knowledge for us of this, that, and the other, and what was going to take place, and telling me, it was just deception, and you could see it near the end of that service at that church. Man, there were people doing blood sacrifices on our front porch, and so it was just this kind of a thing. Move to other churches, and you would have these things. We had a man one time stand up in church and I'd never met him before, and began to prophesy, and I could tell it wasn't anything of God at all. And before I could get to call him out. I turned around, he was gone, right? And so you have those things. They're everywhere. They're false teachers. They create division. They have an authoritative voice, but they're out there. They're out there today. Many of you probably watching them and maybe even taking notes on some of their studies, but they're simply mouthpieces for Satan. And so that's what's going on, and That's how it operates. You see it in the deconstructionists today. Those are nothing more than what this is here. They just have a python spirit, so to speak, and they're just spitting out whatever garbage they want to spit out. And you'll find it everywhere. You'll find it on all your social media platforms. They can call themselves progressive Christians because it sounds better, but there's nothing progressive about it. They call themselves deconstructionists. But they're really not doing anything other than destroying, not deconstructing in order to rebuild. They're just demolishing. They call themselves ex-evangelicals. You'll see them there. You'll see them in the prosperity doctrines. You'll see people like Joel Osteen and all the others, and they're just the same thing. They have a Python spirit about them. They're everywhere, right? And just so you know, that's what's going on. And so in fact, we should know this. All non-believers belong to the kingdom of darkness. All of them. So not everyone who's demonized is going to, have their head turn around, spit out green pea and, peas and do all of that. Not like The Exorcist and all of that. Not all of them look like that. Satan comes as a roaring lion. He comes as a deceiving angel. And so we know that that's how he operates. Masquerades as an angel of light. And so this girl's speaking truth, right? She is. And Satan loves to speak truth in a way to deceive. So what's going on here is she's simply saying these men are the servants of the Most High God who proclaim to you the way of salvation. Now, on its surface, she spoke plain truth. I think the more she did it, the more it irritated Paul. It says, and as she was doing this for many days, Paul having become greatly annoyed. So this thing's annoying. I think because of Paul wants to have no association with her. He doesn't want to be lumped in with her at all. He wants to be as far removed from her as possible. And so, and Paul would do that in the course of his life. You find somebody who's just living in sin, hey man, have nothing to do with them. You find someone who won't provide for their family, hey, don't even eat with such a one. Paul was a divisive man in a healthy sense, right? And so I believe that what's going on here is she's trying to attach, infiltrate, whatever, just align herself with them, maybe to give her more credibility or whatever's going on. And Paul's going to have none of it, right? So this girl's speaking truth, but she's only got one goal. She wants to kind of infiltrate. She's like the witch with Snow White, right? Who was masquerading just some old lady who had a little apple, and it looked like, hey, she's not doing anything wrong. Yet her whole goal was destruction. And so it's just important that we see that. You see that in so many different places. The scriptures speak of the demonic. They're called deluding spirits, spirits of delusion, lying, deceiving. It's not the demonic that show their evil. That's destructive. People like Hitler and Charles Manson and all the others. It's the pretenders, right? It's the Pharisees. Remember when Jesus looked at the Pharisees and said, you are liars and your father is the father of lies, Satan himself, right? And so he could see that happening. Jesus, when he looked at Peter, get thee behind me, Satan, right? What was going on? There were words coming out of his mouth, though he, and that doesn't mean that he was filled with the demonic, but he was a mouthpiece at that moment, and so God calls him out on that, and so we should know that that's going on. 1 Timothy 4 says in the Spirit says that in the last days, right, there will people who will depart from the faith, devoting themselves to deceitful spirits and doctrines of demons, right? So there are deceiving spirits, and there are truths that the doctrines hold. Very similar to the truths. I mean, in the same vein that we hold sets of doctrines, they have a set of erroneous teachings as well, and so they propagate that. Every world religion has these spirits in them, and they're propagating false religions. Pick the most noble spiritual leader you know of outside of the Christian faith, and they are demonic. That we should know that. I mean, I think it's important that takes place. James chapter 3, verse 14. Let me read it to you because it's an interesting statement. James says, but if you have bitter jealousy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast and be false to the truth. This is not the wisdom that comes down from above, but is earthly, unspiritual, demonic. For where jealousy and selfish ambition exist, there will be disorder and every evil practice, right? So here's what we find. You see a system or an organization that's filled with chaos, that they have followed the wisdom of the world. And that's what's going on. You find a group of people who are lying and deceiving, and are under a delusion. Then you find the demonic, and it's everywhere. It's not just in the citadels and halls of Romania. I mean of Russia, but it's here in our hallowed halls of government in America as well. You see the deluding spirit everywhere. It was on show last night. You see it. It's filled with a reality that's not real. And I don't mean to be political, and I'm not. I just want us to understand that this is how it operates. And so Paul casts out this demon, right? This is what he does. Look at what he says. He says. And verse 18, and this she kept doing for many days. Paul, having become greatly annoyed by this, turns and said to the spirit, I command you in the name of Jesus Christ to come out of her. And it came out that very hour. Now, there's something powerful about this. There's something that the man of God has that allows him to do that. Jesus gave that authority to the apostles and then to the 70 when he sent them out, that they could cast out demons. Remember when they came back and they said, man, even the demons obey us. And there's a wealth of people out there today who claim to be able to do all of that. And I'm not saying that they can't. I'm just saying there's suspect. There are times, and we have had times where we have had to do those things, cast out demons and stuff like that. But it's not the norm, and it's not. Mostly, they don't come at you in that way. You will see some, and there are places where they do, and there's a darkness there. But we don't have any authority over them, but God does. And so I just say that for clarity's sake, because there's a lot of little demon slayers out there that think they can just go do that stuff, and they'll find themselves in trouble. Just like the one that we'll meet later in these stories, where they began to try to cast out demons, and the demon goes, "Hey man, we know Paul, and we know these other guys, but who are you, right?" And so it's about the authority of Jesus, and you and me don't have to do all of that stuff. Really, it's an exercise of faith in the person. That the person that has been filled with darkness needs to have their heart open so they can turn from darkness to light. That's what it is. At the end of the day, we're either of the kingdom of darkness or the kingdom of light. And Paul dealt with this in that fashion. And man, powerful truth. Just to look at and to be reminded of today that there is evil in this world, and it doesn't always wear a face of evil like we can see, in Putin and some of these others. It is masquerading a lot of times, and so it's important that we understand that we wrestle not against flesh and blood, and it's important that we call that out, right? And that we see that, just like Jesus looked at Peter and said, "Get thee behind him, he's Satan." So we too should call it out when we see it, and recognize that this delusion and these lies and these deceptions, they're not from God. That's not wisdom from above. It's earthly and it's demonic. And don't fall prey to that. And so that's our message today. Tomorrow, man, we see what happens, because Paul and them are going to get arrested on behalf of this, and we're going to see some incredible truth that flows out of that story. That's for tomorrow. Man, Lord bless you guys. Have a great day. And man, Lord willing, I'll see you in the morning.